last year when.
Okay, we're going to get started.
Looks
Looks like, well, okay, some of us are in green.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
I got green on my socks.
Raw stuff.
I gotta at least have a green shirt. I was gonna say something else, but you know. Okay, couple,
Green chair top.
yeah, I got a green chair top and
Yeah.
I got green, no, I don't have green socks. I hope everybody had a chance to see the article. It was in Sunday's paper and I got it sent out in advance to everybody, so.
And if you
Beautiful picture, Joanne.
and you,
Yeah, well, I'm not beautiful.
well, we were together, so we
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
picture.
right, it's a beautiful picture. So that was taken down, we were at the Crone.
This is the end of February.
Yeah, end of February.
Mid to end February. No, January.
That's right, it was the show change before the show change.
Right, because he said his deadline was February 3rd.
Yeah,
Yeah, so yeah.
so it was mid-January, so, and then it was in the paper on Sunday. So, and from that, we've gotten a couple responses for a class and a speaker. So I'm gonna get, if any of you would like to be speakers and tell everything you know about bonsai and make it last 2 hours. So we're gonna, what I was thinking was that we'll put together a speakers list. And then another thing I was thinking about, we have the beginners class. I'm gonna let Chris tell you about that when he shows up. But I was thinking maybe an introductory class, which would be a couple hours shorter. We might kick out the history and try and make it a little less expensive, because we've had requests for that a couple of times because of that article. And when I told them, you know, $95 in 6 hours, they kind of go, ugh. So I'm thinking maybe we'll do an introductory class. We'll have to put that together somehow and figure out what we're gonna do. But we've had requests for that. Another idea,
I'm sorry, real quick, is that something we could consider subsidizing with a fundraiser to maybe get some new people into the club?
well, that's an idea. That's an idea too. This was, the one that we had was the junior, I don't remember. Yeah.
Some garden.
Some garden club
Yeah.
was asking. So that's a good idea. We can keep that in mind.
Well, in the past, what has happened is if one of our guys speak for a garden club or something, we charge them. And then that money is donated to the club. So, you know, we do that. And if we're gonna do an introductory class and offer a tree and stuff, we can charge them for the tree. And
Yeah, we got to charge, yeah.
we can figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what was I gonna say? Oh, we were down at the Crone this week, we were talking with Kat and Mark about putting some of our award-winning trees at the Crone. Okay,
For a month and rotate them.
for a month and rotate them out, in and out. Now, there are, what, a dozen? Well, if we count the outside.
Months, yeah.
Yeah. Let me write that down. I thought there were 13. Well, you know, when we change the daylight saving time, there'll be one less.
2023.
Yeah, 2023. Okay, anyway, we were talking about putting the award-winning trees from the butterfly show, or from the Crone show in October, giving them the opportunity, if they want to, rotate them through the Crone for a month. We would set up, you know, it would be along the normal, with the normal trees, we'd probably take one or two out and send them to Warders, you know, for a rest. But that was something we were thinking about also. It might be something we can start doing earlier if we just start using the award-winning trees from last year. So if you've got one, Judy. Oh, you already said no?
I'll tell you,
I want to put you on the spot here.
yeah,
No, I'll tell you
Yeah.
why.
You should have said something ahead of time.
I know.
No, because, here's the thing, I've got a greenhouse and I know how many critters live in greenhouses and all that kind of stuff. It's a problem, rotating stuff in and out. And you can't take my tree was an outdoor tree, you can't
Okay.
stick it in a greenhouse
Okay.
That's true.
for that period of time. Plus, they really require, almost daily watering.
And they get daily water.
Yeah.
Okay.
it's like-
Well, these are things, thank you for bringing this up.
Yeah.
And
So
I'd be afraid of what my tree might catch while I'm there.
Well, it's reciprocal, you can bring things in, you
Okay.
can catch things there,
But it's my
Yeah.
bugs.
But the,
I would refer you to the person who takes care of the insecticide and pesticide and fungicide and everything, and we can have a chat about.
And she's sitting right next to you.
Yeah. And I would beg to differ with you about well, we can talk.
Yeah, okay.
it
Those are
also-
good things to keep in
Some
mind.
possibilities, if we're talking about tropical trees that, can take that environment, that's one thing, but, after October, basically the trees outside are not really, visible, because it took me
Yeah.
years to figure out how to get there, to the outer display area. And, so if you're talking about a cool growing conifer, which would have to be out there, is, kind of a moot thing.
Well, and the other thing is tropical trees, they're indoor. During the winter, taking them out to rotate them, you gotta,
Well, okay, we can,
Down below 0 day, we wait until it's 40 or above.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and we
Yeah.
wouldn't put them outside, we'd keep them
Right.
inside.
Yeah.
But, just a thought.
yeah, okay,
If
we
they
can,
were
we can,
interested, great, and if not.
yeah, we can work through these things and see if there's any possibility any of the trees can do it. I mean, it was an idea we brought up, we didn't even, and you're the first person we've asked.
I'm just sorry. I would be,
Hey, what-
let's put it this way.
trees
I'd be
award
happy
winning.
to,
Look at his tree.
maybe share a tropical tree here or there, kind of thing.
That's what the idea
Yeah.
is, sharing
So-
it for maybe one or two or
Yeah,
not. But,
And not
Okay.
the one that happened to be the one that won a prize.
okay,
Well, yeah.
okay. All right, we can talk about that. There's obviously a lot of things we need to discuss. Today, Saturdays beginners class. You want to talk a little bit about that?
You want me to do beginner school? Okay.
Or just give us,
Yeah, that's,
2 minutes on beginners class.
is that all? Shut the camera down. Okay. The beginners class, as it stands right now, is going to be on June 11th. That's a Saturday. And it will start at 9 a.m. and go to 4 p.m. like in years past. The cost for people that want to take the class and get a tree in the pot and the soil on the wire and all the kind of help that you ever thought possible. Right? Gotta promise that. And it was a whole lot of fun too. As well. So, at any rate, it's a bargain, and the club makes some monies, which we use obviously to pay for our guest speakers from out of town.
what's the price of it?
Right now, it's either going to be 90 or 95. We're still in the discussion part of it as far as that goes. It looks like it's leaning towards 90, which, if any of you remember, 2 years ago was the last time we had a beginner's class, I think at least, and they were 85 for a couple of years at least before, from that point on back. So we had to raise it up because obviously things cost more than they do now than they used to. Recently used to. So, it's going to be right here. There's going to be you can pass this word around, as much as you can. There'll be a new handout, sign-up sheet, whatever. It's going to have, we'll email it out to anybody that's got email addresses in our club. You'll get copies of it. So you can print it off and send it out and hand them out or whatever the case may be. But I've got to get a link because this garden center is handling the payment of it. You can pay online. You don't have to send in cash or checks or whatever the case may be. Or firstborn sons or anything like that. They're gonna handle it, they've got.
As soon as it goes online on the Civic Garden Center, please send out an email, because it'll sell out fast.
Yeah.
And if you're interested, please sign up.
Or know anybody that's
You
interested.
know what kind of tree it'll be?
It's gonna be a ficus.
Okay.
Yep.
Because if I'm recommending like new people to take this class,
Uh-huh.
they're gonna want something that's a little easier to keep alive.
Well, that is. That's one of the
It's
easiest.
something they could probably bring in and then when it.
Right, right. Yeah, we're trying to cover that as far as that goes. So, all that'll be spelled out in the handout. Keep an eye on your inbox, because that could be happening anytime soon as far as that goes, because we want to get that printed up too, so we have it
Butterfly.
at Butterfly Show has started.
Starts Saturday.
It starts this Saturday,
Yeah, that's
18th.
Joanne speaking next.
18th already. Okay. I knew it was the latter part of March, but it still is the latter part of March by 2 days.
Yes. It's
So,
going fast.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
And things are leafing out. I got a larch in my front yard that's leafed out. Of course, it does it every year. I think it's maybe one that came from Russia. Don't say anything about that. But anyway, I know what you're thinking. But every year it's leafed out by the end of March. So figure it out. So I got a whole bunch of different species. That's a whole nother story. Years ago, and I planted one in the yard because it lost its label. When you have little rugrats running around the house and, hey, look, Dad, here's all the labels of them.
Oh, no.
And I had 9 varieties of larches back then. So anyway, enough of that story. So
Is there gonna be a list tonight that we could sign up for the beginners class?
Probably not. We've got, it's gonna have to be online.
yeah, because it's got to get paid through one of the things.
Yeah, I
Use the
haven't
form
talked.
that's coming. You're not, if you did it tonight, you're not going to beat anybody, but as soon as you get the form in with your, maybe next week's notice or whatever the case may be, whatever he decides to send out with it.
Yeah, I have a tendency to get an email. I'll handle it tomorrow, and then tomorrow's about 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I'll get it out, I'll get it out to us as soon as I get it. And then Phil was gonna put it on the website also. And then we're also gonna put it down at the Butterfly Show. So, anyway,
So we can go to our website and then there'll be a link to go to there.
be a link to go to the registration. So,
Anybody wants the information, I'll have my name on there instead of Joanne's, Jones. And, unless you want me to keep me on there.
No, thank you.
No, I'm just kidding.
I did about 5 of them. I did my share.
You did yours,
Yeah, I did.
that's definitely it.
Time to pass it on to somebody else.
Yeah.
okay.
So I think that kind of takes care of, no it doesn't. I am sending out a sheet, I'll get to this. I need some instructors for the class on June 11th, that's Saturday. Hopefully we can have 2 or 3 or 4 instructors, especially in case somebody can't show up for one reason or another, God forbid for whatever reason. But it's always kind of fun to have different inputs, just like last month's meeting, we had 2 people sitting up here and they were, bouncing off each other a little bit sometimes, as well as with the crowd. But anyway, we need 2 instructors / teachers, whatever the case, at least 2, as far as that goes. So if any of you feel welcome to, and there will also be for them all the students. If anybody has taken the beginner's class in recent years, this probably looks familiar. And then I've got some other stuff that he gave me in a bunch, so I have to go over with her too. It might be something else we can hand out to
Chris,
some other things.
we can talk later about
Okay.
some of the older books.
Yeah.
Of what I did, because I updated and revised and everything, so that's the latest.
Okay, good. So,
You can revise it again.
So, yeah, I'll be working on that in the next few weeks or months or whatever. We also need, especially, because we're gonna have 30 people around 15 tables in this room. We usually have them in a circle for those who've been familiar with the years past. And I'd like to see 15 mentors to help these rookies out and how to wire in the tree, how to do some pruning, how to shape it or what to look at it, how to pot it up, so on and so forth. Because even though we may cover some of that material in the class itself, as anybody knows anything about teaching, that what is like 85% of what you get taught goes in here, comes out there, or someplace else. But so it's got to be refreshed as far as that goes. As far as the knowledge and the education is concerned. So, there's been times where I've done it where I've had to do 3 or 4 people and kind of keep an eye on each one of them and say, okay, well, you do this and decide this, and you can start wiring this one, or you can pot this up, and it works out better the more people we can get to help these kindergartners, the better. So. So I will take sign-ups for instructors, and I will take sign-ups for mentors. And of course, it's all the class goes. The mentoring part doesn't start till 1 o'clock. It goes from 1 to 4. So you guys are, take your time getting here, eat your lunch. They'll be out to lunch. They're supposed to be out to lunch. There'll be an hour break, so. 11:30 to 12, the students will be out of here, or they're bringing their own lunch, because that was one of the suggestions that they do. Because other than White Castles, I can't think of anything that you can walk to.
Not walking distance, I'm taking out some car and go.
Yeah,
We'll talk about that.
but yeah,
That's.
but that'll be on something on the sign up thing and the handouts as far as that goes. On June 4th. I just noticed I misspelled something. I'm hosting again out of my nursery what's called the Williamsburg Garden Artisan Fair. It's got somewhere around 15, give or take a handful, of vendors that are scheduled to come. And anybody's been out to my place. I've got a nice quarter-mile long driveway, and they'll be tailgating and setting up tents along the whole thing. And it's all for the most part, something that's either been handmade, but or it's something that has something to do with horticulture or gardening or nature, that kind of material. In fact, even we have a group from a beehive association. They were going to bring soaps and honeys, and they might even bring a sample hive and stuff like that if they can manage to do that. So just to give you an idea, another rock collector, and so I'm setting up in the barn, so in case it even drizzles or something, is one of the stops that can be made by people to walk around. And obviously, this being a week before the class, if there's anything, you might be able to get some people, if we have any openings still, but I doubt it too, but you never know. So, but we also will probably even know between now and then whether we're going to even put together another beginner's class in the fall. It's been talked about. So, at any rate, consider it a chance to bring out some plants, bring out your plants, work on them with everybody, like the first Saturday workshop used to happen. Going to have a place for the Bonsai Society to be there, and you guys, whoever comes, can talk about, just like you do at the Butterfly Show, talk about the club and what it's like, and et cetera, et cetera. Promote us up. So, and then while this goes around, I do have flyers, little small flyers of the fair that's being sent out and mailed out. And going to be a newspaper thing about it as well. So, am I missing anything?
Saturday. It's gonna rain.
Yeah, back to follow up.
Workshop on Saturday. We got a concern that it could be raining on Saturday. If you look at the weather maps, that's what there is. So the choices are, if it rains on Saturday, do we want to, probably, if it's outdoors, it couldn't happen. So there's Sunday or the following Saturday.
Instead of mine.
Well, do you wanna do?
Not, I don't have the water inside the barn
No,
and the pots, and there's not enough room,
okay.
not anymore.
So we've either got Sunday or the following Saturday. So if you're gonna come,
Get a fish on it.
pardon me?
I'm not
Oh,
talking
okay,
about the
so,
date on that.
Will you send out an email to tell people whether it's a go or no go?
Well, we wanted to take a consensus about it, who was gonna be coming to the workshop to begin with, and whether Sunday would be, you know, how many, just to get a percentage of who's here right now.
Well, what's the weather like Sunday?
Sunday's supposed to be high, I have 62 and sunny, which is 10 degrees warmer than what's supposed to be on Saturday. Of course, anybody knows when it's 10 degrees colder than that and it's raining, it feels even colder than that. So, now, what the other thing we can do is, because I know people go to church and whatever the case may be, we will normally start on Saturday at 10 a.m. But on Sunday, we can start at noon and we can go all afternoon if you want. Same place, same setups, no rain.
so if you're planning on coming,
It'll be nicer.
if you're planning on coming, just give us a, what do you think? Who's planning on coming? What do
I
you
had planned on coming on Saturday, but I have a vacation scheduled for Sunday, so I would rather postpone for 1 week.
Okay.
But if it needs to happen on Saturday, I can figure it out.
Okay, anyone else planning on being there? Okay, Julie's been doing the registration, so
Uh-huh.
we can talk to her and see how many are signed up, and we can go from there.
Yeah.
So, and,
And the only reason we put in a notice about the workshops for Saturday and the $5 fee that you can pay when you get there, is I want to find out how many people are coming, get a little bit of a commitment level to some extent from who's going to come and how many I should set up for.
yeah,
So, but,
okay, we'll
plenty of
keep that in mind.
So,
Okay, last but not least, Joanne and the Butterfly Show.
Yeah, Butterfly Show starts Saturday, right or shy? Because it's inside the Crown. Every Wednesday and Saturday, from now, this Saturday until June 19th, we have a table, and you come and bring your trees and just work on your trees, and people will ask questions, and you answer questions about the club. We have a brochure about the club. It's a lot of fun, and you get to work on your trees. And I'd like to have at least 2 people, per shift. The shift runs 10 to 2. I recommend you get there by 9:30 so you can get in the back way.
And find a parking place.
And find a parking place, because with the Butterfly Show, it's really popular and people will, you'll have trouble finding a parking space. But at any rate, I have a sign-up sheet for it. By doing this, what this allows us to do is we have our Christmas party at the Crone. It allows us to have classes there. We're gonna start, from what I understand, we're gonna start the first Saturday again, and we'll have that at the Crone. So, it allows us a lot of things to do, and it's just fun. So I have the sign-up sheet here, pass it around. Well, and if you think about the Saturdays between now and June 19th, and I know there's like Mother's Day in there, Father's Day, Easter. Look at your calendar at home. You may not know, what your calendar says at home. Call me, email me, or talk to Steve or whatever. He can get me the message. Okay? I appreciate it.
Okay.
And I think you had my email and phone number in the last
Oh, yeah.
email. So yeah. So
Okay.
please volunteer. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes.
Just not about that specifically, just about the whole thing.
Pardon me?
But just about the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, if anyone,
Let me just ask.
yeah, go ahead, you can handle it.
I have the ability at work to do a few things, because I work for industrial heat treater on Kellogg Avenue. I recently bought pumice, so I could do some repotting. It is expensive, because they have to ship it from Oregon. However, if you buy it in 1 yard cubes or greater, it significantly reduces the cost. So while you might order from Superfly and it'll be $10 per gallon, if we bought in 1, 2, up to 40,000 pounds for a truckload, okay, we could reduce it to about $1 per gallon for materials. So we could potentially do that for pumice, black lava, and maybe even down the line for akadama if we wanted to go that far. I know a lot of people use different aggregates like safety sword and turfus and things like that around here. But if we wanted to step it up a little bit. Additionally, I work for a heat treater and I've been annealing my own copper wires. That would be another potential multiplier where we could get spools of 1,000 foot of different size wires, pull our money together, get that, and I could anneal it at work. It's not as clean as some that you purchase online because I don't quench it to get all the scale off, but it is soft. So if you're interested, I guess just email Steve and then maybe I'll help coordinate it.
Okay, great. Okay, send me a little bit of a write-up and I'll send that out in the next newsletter because, yeah, Superfly, I called them, I bought some wire for for our guest speakers. And besides wanting an arm and a leg for it, they don't have it.
Yeah.
Copper wire is hard to find right now.
One of my customers is Southwire, which supplies to Lowe's and to Home Depot and things like that. I've been annealing that stuff you buy off the shelf, the 4 gauge, the 6 gauge, the 8, the 10, and the 14 from Home Depot. The only thing that needs to happen if we're gonna do that, if we buy a large spool of it, even just buying 1,200 feet from the spools at Home Depot, you just gotta unspool it into a certain size and figure out a method to do that, and then I can put it in my furnace with any standard heat treat that I do. It's a little dirtier than you would get from Superfly, because again, they water quench it, and that takes all that stuff off. I'm gonna experiment with dipping it in vinegar to clean it up and see how that works. But that's really the only labor we have to do is, just figure out how long we're at. Spools, measure it out, roll it up, put it in. I can just throw it in with anything at work.
Okay.
So it's literally the price that it costs there. So like example, I want to say it was 10, 12, and 14 recently, and it was like 28 cents per foot, where you're going to pay twice that.
Yeah, at least $1.
Yeah.
Easily. Okay. All
Or
right.
if you just feel like if we don't coordinate everything, if you just want to get in touch with me because you want to anneal some wire, I'll do it for you. Just drop it all off the furnace.
All right. Anything else? Okay. Chris.
Here.
You're up. Chris is good.
I'm trying to be secretary still. And
Oh,
I'm
that's
laying
right. Yeah. Well, you gotta take care of
Don't
that.
you want to mention about people wanting to be on the board?
Oh, yeah.
Just thought of that. And he mentioned secretary.
Yeah, okay. We've got elections this year, June timeframe. So if you're interested, there are gonna be a couple of openings for next year. But if you're interested and you wanna know what the duties are, there's a vice president, a president, vice president, treasurer, secretary. Yeah, there's a second vice president, a third vice president.
Membership.
Yeah, there's one that does membership,
Membership,
one that
yeah.
Frank does communication, Bob's the treasurer, then there's membership. Anyway,
Secretaries, two secretaries, one's a recording secretary,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
other one's some other kind of.
Right, and that's that's one of the vice presidents.
Yeah.
Anyway, we don't know who's gonna be rerunning yet, but I'll be around and ask, but if you'd like to volunteer, it's a 2-year term. If you're interested, see me and I will take your name down. So, thank you. Anything else? Okay. Obviously, Chris has already been introduced because he's been talking already. Chris is going to talk about deciduous trees. He's brought half a dozen examples. Dawn redwoods, maples, hackberry, or hornbeam.
No,
No.
no,
Anyway, go ahead, Chris. You got it.
no, let me get my paperwork out of the way so we can get dirty, as far as that goes. this is kind of a follow-up to what we discussed last week, or last month. Seems like a week ago already, believe it or not. Which involved, what to do during the wintertime and how to get things ready, to even start pruning, to even start wiring. And it's nothing like a naked tree to work on, as far as that goes, because you haven't got any foliage in the way. You can see the structure, and actually I love working on deciduous plants in the wintertime because of that. I mean, I've even got some trees in the yard that I don't even like unless they're naked, unless they don't have foliage on them, because one's like a big contorted hazelnut, some of you may be familiar with, and that looks the best when there isn't anything on it, because it's all gnarly and silver and old and so on and so forth. So, the deciduous time is perfect. The other reason, the other main reason being is that they're dormant, and all the energy stored in the root system, for the most part, to come out this spring. Now, this one, some of you may have already looked and saw the buds are kind of swelling and they're kind of even green, because this came out of a polyhouse. It's an overwintering polyhouse. The maples, yeah, the buds are starting to get a little bit bigger than what we might have seen last month, as far as that goes. One of the things I'll be talking about too is about how much resilience that plants have, trees have, and other related things with them. That you can get away with a lot of things that you might not have thought about. You would think, oh, good grief, it's taking off too much, or so on and so forth. One of the main things is if you know your tree is healthy, you can pretty well get away with attempted murder, and it's still enough. Okay, all the way to that point. I mean, what you would think would be, as far as that goes. But I did bring a variety of deciduous things. This one happens to be a Chinese elm, lace bark elm, the one that gets a nice green and orangey bark on it. There's a few Dawn redwoods here. Actually, this one and that one. We'll get to that one in a little bit. And then these are a couple trident maples that I grabbed out of the polyhouse. The thing to do, as far as that goes, that any time that you can see a bud, and I'm going to trim off a couple things just because I know they're long, because I want them to. This is a trident maple. You can see the buds, and I'm going to do one trimming off one, as far as that goes, or I'll trim both of these things off as far as that goes. And this is how you want to trim back to a pair of buds. Now, at the same time, if you definitely, like for instance, I want this to go out, but I want some more branches over here. You would trim back here, but you only want the plant to go, you only want the branching to go the terminal bud, and that's going to be your new one. And what you can do is, because there's a pair, maples are opposite branched, and if you want to know how to remember what native trees are opposite branched, it's dogwoods, ashes, and maples. Otherwise known as, what I learned in horticulture school a long time ago, it's the damn trees. Okay? And how you can remember that. I never forgot since then. I mean, it works for me, so as far as that goes. So that's a try on it. Now, given the fact that the Dawn redwoods are, and I've picked a branch here that isn't showing it at all. I'll take it. No, I want that one too. Okay, I'm going to take this one off here. If you look here, Dawn redwoods, which are not a native tree, sort of. Believe it or not, if somebody does complain and say, well, I only want to plant native trees in my yard, tell them they could get a Dawn redwood. And then, of course, if they know anything at all, which a lot of times they don't, if they come up with that kind of question to begin with, they'll say, well, I only want native trees. Well, it is native to the United States. I have the fossils to prove it. They come from Montana and Wyoming area. And if somebody says, well, Dawn redwoods only, they just discovered them in China in 1941. That's just what was left of them originally. Just like ginkgos, everybody thinks, well, they came from Asia. I got fossils from Washington State of ginkgo tree leaves. So, and I know some people in horticulture, one, I won't mention the guy's name, he was the one when they started having the native tree movement, you got to plant only native trees. And they go, to where? And that's what he said the same thing. He says, yeah, exactly. He says, it's all relative. I said, for instance, you want to go native to the planet, or you want to go native to the region, or a continent, or a state, or a county, or whatever. That's entirely up to you. But I know one thing, for instance, like the Dawn redwoods, for instance, or like another tree. They can't read, besides can't read in fertilizer bags and reference books, they don't know how to read a map either. They'll grow anywhere that they can as far as that goes. But here's a Dawn redwood, you can see its opposite branch. One I was going to pick off, once in a while you find some, and it's only because, like this particular one, looks like it's alternate branching. It's probably, if you look on the other side of where the one bud would be, there's a place where there was one. Like, for instance, this one here looks like there's only one here, but on the other side, there's a scar left from another bud. Fell off, broke off, quit growing for some reason or another, but anyway. So now on the other end of that scale, I'm alternate branching. This is a Chinese elm, or elm is part of a flora, and that's alternate branching. Now, given that Dawn redwoods make a nice, fast-growing bonsai, Trident maples have it's a nice version and an easier, hardier thing to work on or to have as a specimen than it's an alternative for Japanese maple, in other words. So, but in fact, when I first joined the society many years ago, back when nobody can remember when I did, it was in the late 80s, I guess. I don't know. So it was the big deal. Okay, Trident maples were a big deal. We had a guy that lived in Kentucky, and he was a grower. He had a field full of bonsai Trident maples. He sold them in his bonsai store in Newport, or going closer to Bellevue, I guess. So everybody had Trident maples. So as far as that goes, things go in phases as far as that. I mean, for quite a while, some of you may have been in the club for quite a while, almost as long as I ever, whatever. Shipaku junipers was a rage for a while. So, but then they started coming back. That's one of the reasons why I got the Trident maples. I said, okay, it's been a long time since everybody got burnt out on Trident maples. I'm going to get some Trident maples and start playing with those as far as that goes. So things come and go. History repeats itself. And but getting back to the plants, obviously this hasn't even broken anything yet. I mean, this is really fast asleep, and unlike your husband or wife, you can't wake it up. So, but these things don't take much. And like I mentioned, I've got 2 larches in my yard. One of them is leafed out like crazy, and the other one isn't. It all depends on where they came from. And then for some reason or another, that one has not adjusted itself to what our, growing, normal growing season is. So plants are funny that way. We're still learning. There isn't anybody that's 100% knowledgeable on every plant and know everything about as far as that goes.
Google does.
What's that?
Google does. You just go to Google and say, hey, tell me everything about this tree or that tree, and it knows.
Yeah, but you don't know whether it's lying to you or not either. But at any rate, there's a lot of one of the reasons that you can get away with, again, I was mentioning how the trees don't know how to read books and all that jazz, and that they don't know what's going on, as far as that goes. There's no senses or anything like that. They just do what they do, and if you treat them right and nurture them right, or take care of them as far as feeding and watering and whatnot, they'll do great things for you. And that's kind of why we're all here. We do great things with what they give us, as far as that goes. If it dies, you get another one, so. And you learn from your mistakes, and I'm still making some as well. So we all do. Given if this was full of foliage, I wouldn't know where to go with it as far as that goes. In fact, when I picked it out and I was carrying it back to the truck, I said, okay, now what am I going to do with this one? And there's a bunch of options as far as design, because this is just a seedling. It's been pinched back and cut so that it would branch out and get bushier, and still could go through that, that process. Even this one, like for instance, this might even be flexible enough that I could actually put some wire on there and then try to get my taper down as far as that goes. And to give you an example, when I start even doing that, if I wanted to give this some trunk like this and turn this into the apex, or the apex would be up in here someplace, but this is a lot of loam. There's so much easier, easy ways to go about this. I really like scissors. Yeah. So, figuring that I can wire this and go up this way, and then even try to get some more taper, and I would probably end up coming up this branch. So I'm going to take this out. As far as that goes. And say I'm going to run it up this way. So this is going, I could run it up this way. Now there's a whole bunch of buds here, and I'm going to turn it back to the top two, for that matter, because that's going to be a leader. This is going to be a branch, because this is, I picked this only because if I were to trim this off, I didn't have anything else up here. So I wanted to have some more, because as anybody knows, the top of a tree has a lot of branching to it. And that creates the crown of the tree as far as that goes. So I didn't want to, cut myself short. Now, mind you, there's 4 buds, maybe even 6 buds in this little stem here that I'm going to let branch out. And then as they branch out, or the buds break and they branch out this spring, they'll get about, I'll leave the first 2 leaves alone, and it goes up to it gets the second set, and it just starts to shove to the third. I'll cut back to the first 2. Okay, so just leave those 2, because everywhere where these buds are is where a leaf, 2 leaves. If there's 2 buds, there were 2 leaves there. As far as that goes, so if I decide that I'm going to take this and go this way with it, and I can see some bud scars here, but I'm going to leave this one alone. And then even trim back to this 2, and here's 1. Even though it's just 1, it'll come out. And but it's there. So what I could end up doing is giving this a little bit of a curvature and play around with this and do this as far as that goes. Bring this branch down here, put this one up here, maybe move this one over this way, and take this one and leave that here. And then just wait for nature to take its course as far as that goes. If you want me to wire it, I can wire it to give you an idea, or if you don't know if you can see that or not. But we'll come back to that as far as that goes. This has an option too of going all kinds of ways. And I was going to bring something, and I did not grab it, but well, we can do it with this one anyway. That there's a number of people in the club would take a look at this tree and says, well, I want to get my taper, going up here and going up this branch and going out here. And they would literally, and I'm going to do it anyway because I can, start over. Okay? And unfortunately, I can even take this and shorten this one to here. And even shorten that one and get this one back to a couple of buds. And I like how this one's already kind of turning, but a little bit of wire, I could take this and turn that a little bit. And then even okay, I'm going to keep smaller ones here as far as that goes.
Now, are you ever concerned about dieback?
Not when it's got a nice live bud on it, no.
Okay.
No. Sometimes it happens, and everybody knows about that. I know the health of this plant. You can see the fertilizer pellets in there, so I know it got fed last year and in previous years as far as that goes. But now you got to remember that now another option to even get this to get a little bit bigger. But I want to fill this up with a whole lot more branches. I want things to leaf out and then cut, because what you got to remember, this root system in this tree, for this tree, is loaded up with all kinds of energy that this was made last year. So where's it going to go? It's not going out here anymore. It's going to be coming up into these branches, and it's going to be very vigorous when it gets, because it's being healthy and it's got food reserves in the root system. It's going to be very vigorous. Even if I wire this to where I want to get them to go, and I can start pruning this spring. And I have taken some of these, and you can see some of them got, I don't know why those stubs came up like that, but there's buds there. But it was mainly just trying to get things to bush out some more and create more foliage and more ramification of branches. So the one I wanted to work on here was to give you an example. I wanted to show you how you can get some more growth and more circumference to your trunk and whatnot by having something on the tree and leaving it. Now, like I mentioned on these two as well, that I was trying to create, both these trees were a lot taller, and now I eventually want to have the taper go from the top of the tree, which is always the skinniest, and that's and it gets thicker as it goes along. Now, since all of this is on this branch, this is going to start growing more. And the more pinching I do, the more leaves are going to be there. It's going to produce more leaves, and it's going to get fuller and thicker and healthier, and it's going to feed this branch, which now is going to be a trunk, as far as that goes. Now, on that same note, that what my idea was with this is a Dawn redwood, and I was going to, I already found out that there's a nice little Nabari Dawn redwoods put together, a root flare, trunk flare, you pick your name, real soon in early age. If you want to see a 34-year-old tree in my front yard, for those who've been there before, it's a 90-foot tree, and the nabari on it is roughly about 6 or 7 feet across at ground level. Jimmy knows what I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah.
Isn't it huge?
Yeah.
I mean, this is beautiful. It's like, I mean, granted, I watched it grow up, and I keep thinking, because I know what Don Redwoods you can get away with, because I experiment with some Don Redwoods, and just, I tried to kill one, and so to speak, just to see what I could get away with. So, okay, I'm going to do something. Damn thing lived anyway. So
I can kill it.
Huh? Well, yeah, you
Killed one of yours, actually.
Okay.
One of the workshops we did.
You had to work at it. So pretty easy. Okay. So anyway, because I often visualize when that thing was growing up and they had a bar like this, I said, I think I can root prune that, and I can just go and let it break back. Because literally, if I took everything off of this Don Redwood and just let that stump there, like just everything from my hand up, this spring will have buds going all over the place. Okay? And you can see there's buds all along this stem and this one. And those are buds just, they're waiting to grow. They're already starting to show some green. So what I'm going to do is, because I haven't seen it or heard it talk too much in previous bonsai demos, as far as that goes, of doing what they call having a sacrificial branch or a sacrificial leader, whatever. You've probably heard, some of you have heard that term, some of you may not. And what I'm planning on doing is I'm going to let this grow, this big guy here, because my thought on this, and I'm also going to let it grow, I'm going to trim everything off of it and let it push out here, okay? Because I'm going to form something with this leader and create my taper from here down to here, and just have a tree that's about this high. What this one's going to do, even though it's going to get fatter or wider, it's going to have foliage, and it's going to feed the tree. It's going to feed it for next year's root system, and year after that, and year after that. And when you have that foliage on there, that's going to end up increasing the caliper of the tree. Okay? And that's what you want. Granted, right now it's just, like almost like my thumb sticking out of the soil. But the genetics of a Don Redwood tree is to have a really nice buttressing root system. You think bold cypress have a nice flare as far as where the trunk meets the soil. Don Redwoods are twice as good at doing that. That's a matter of my own opinion. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this grow here, because when I create this tree, and I'm going to wire this, probably, trying to snake it back over this way again, and put it over like this. And of course, the structure of the tree is the part that you really want, that's what you're trying to do something with, because that is the parts that give you the feeling of age. It's not the foliage. Foliage is what keeps us alive. But as you can tell, deciduous trees, and you can do this with conifers too, as far as that goes. But exposing as much of the branches and the trunk is where you're going to get that feeling, styling to get the feeling of an aged tree, only in miniature. Of course, in some respects, I may be preaching to the choir as far as that goes. So, with that in mind, because, that hasn't been turned back yet. 10 after 7? Gee. Now, give me an idea how much you can get away with. I could take this tree out of this pod, wash all the soil off of it, trim the roots, and put it in a training pot, in a bonsai pot, as far as that goes, or a training pot. And then eventually, as it grows up, I can eventually move it to another pot, trim the roots, get it down smaller. This one in particular, I brought this in because it was.
What is that one?
This is another Don Redwood.
Okay.
And I left the group, I kind of whacked on it a little bit a couple of times, because I have a grove of Don Redwoods that I'm working on. And this is one that's supposed to go in to replace one of them that died in this grove. I can't remember, there's 9, 10 trees in there, something like that. This is one of them that I've been growing to put in the grove. Because right now it's in like a rectangular training pot, if you will, or a box, if you want. And I don't want it to be that way because I don't want it to be a rectangular planting when I put it on. It doesn't look natural when I put it on a rock slab. I want another tree, put one side offset on the other, and get rid of the rectangular formation that the root system is now having. So you're getting a look at it the first time I have looked at it since I planted this tree in this pot. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is try not to make a mess. But to give you an idea of what you can get away with, somebody's going to like seeing this.
You want that whole thing up on that other table?
Yep.
I can do that too. Hey, you want to help me with it? Sure, grab the handle. Yeah. I can just hear Phil back there going, damn it, I have to move the camera around. If you need a good digging tool like this, Jimmy, what do you start with? Tell a story.
Grilling tools or any spatula found at your local Goodwill.
Cut off the end,
Bend
heat it up,
sharpen
bend it up, sharpen the point to whatever degree you want. My 2 wooden chopsticks that I don't think they're in there somewhere. I have 2 different kinds of points on these 7 chopsticks. I don't remember what I ate for dinner with them, but I do I do have a rounded one and more of a pointier one out of the 2 that I got. So, now what I want to do with this, and I don't have a big bucket of tub of water like we will have it, and hoses with guns on them that can wash the roots off easier. But sometimes, let's put it this way. Now, how to know whether you're trimming off too many roots or not? If I cut there, that would be too many roots off. Okay? If it's somewhere in between there and there, it's going to be okay. All right? Now you think about this, and in fact, I was thinking about it today because I had to get a new water meter for my hose line that goes out to my polyhouses where I water my plants. And because the other one froze. I don't know how it froze in my basement, but it did. It broke. So I had to get a new part for it. Well, I was thinking about, this particular company supplies all different kinds of construction companies and builders and whatnot, and you see so many indications of what a tree can do and how resilient they are by going around like a home site or a building site and where they're leaving the trees there. And the fact that they can be pretty well to the point of even being persecuted to death by, okay, here's a tree in the yard, and they drill a trench right through here and goes to the house, and this one goes to the street, and that's where they put the sewer line. Now, I mean, you gotta use a little common sense. Because I did see a tree like that up in Indian Hill, oak this big around. They were that far away with a new water line trench. Water line's gotta be down 2.5 feet or 3 feet. Well, about 3 or 4 years later, after that thing got all cut off and about 40% of its roots were cut, wind came and went, that was it. But it was alive when it fell over. And the only reason it fell over that way is because the wind came out of the north and blew the tree to the south.
Did you put it in a pot?
That would have been nice having a 32-inch wide, root flare. It would have been hell to take to the yearly crowship. But another example of how, a good healthy tree, some things you can get away with. Now, I have collected a tree, and before I get any further on the first thought, I collected a tree out in Colorado. And it's a Colorado, it's a ponderosa pine. Collected it back in 2007. It's still growing in my training pond. Because I really wanted to, wait until this thing got fully established and we took care of itself and, got good healthy or healthier than what it was, which was perfectly healthy where I got it from. It's a tree only about this tall. It has a trunk about that big around on it. There's a nice sharding down a lot of this part of it on its own. I never created that or anything. And when I dug it out of the ground on the side of a mountain in the San Juan Mountains outside of southeast or southwest of Denver, and the tree, I found it growing in a pocket. Now, I looked at the wood of this tree, and I estimated that this tree is approximately 250 years old. Okay? And, I got to count the rings in the tree with almost a microscope. I had 20x magnifying glass, and I had a Dell at the time with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I still had more than 99 thousandths of an inch to go to get 1/8 of an inch or something like that. So I'm just exaggerating there, but so a 2.5 or 3 inch trunk that had basically somewhere in the vicinity of 20 to 25 years and 1/8 of an inch. Do the math, figure out how old it is. So, and I got a pine from out of a crevice in Canada once too. And I killed it with kindness, I think. It's either that or it was just on its way out. And I got to have it alive for 5 years. But
What kind of substrate is that in right now? Did you
well,
start from
okay,
seed?
since you brought that up, I'm glad you did. Now, nursery mix is basically, on the average, 99% organic matter. Yeah, I've got some gravel in here or something like that, but it's 99% organic matter. There's pine bark in it, there's hardwood mulch, there might be some peat moss depending on which plant it is. It don't matter, because believe it or not, these guys can't tell what you're putting around the roots, but they will be affected by the pH level as far as that goes, because at certain levels, different levels of pH will allow the root system to grab nutrients out of it, or it'll lock up some nutrients depending on what it is. That's why you hear about trees with chlorosis. But the reason that the nurseries use a lot of organic matter is because a tree in a pot by the way, it's looking like this right now. And there's a big root mass down here. Okay? And that is actually rather, I mean, I could take some, it would take me a while to take all this apart and just have it all nice and loose and hanging out. But there's an easy. But if we get back to the soil too, the reason we have all the organic matter in our soil mixes is because water is a big expense in raising trees. So we wanted to hold water. We don't want it to dry out. Because that means, that's not good for the trees we're trying to grow. Now, because we also know that it's going to be in the pot until somebody takes it out of the pot and puts it in the ground. Okay? So then that's where it's going to get air and water all the time. Now, mind you, the loose mix is very airy and loose, and you can't squeeze it and do what you can with clay. This is going to fall apart. So that's what we want. We want a whole lot of roots, because that's what feeds the tree, and that's what takes stuff out of here. The fertilizer we put in, the water, whatever gets out of the decaying organic matter is going to send it up the tree, and the tree's going to grab sunlight and make chlorophyll, and that makes food and sugars, so on and so forth, and that sends it down to the roots, so the roots can grow. And it's an ongoing process. That's why there's called a xylem and a phloem. But when we're doing bonsai planting, we're putting a tree in a pot that's going to be in a pot for the rest of its life. Now, if you have it in 99% organic matter, eventually this stuff's going to decompose and get to the point where it starts causing root problems because it doesn't dry out. And every tree needs air as much as they need water. Okay? Whether it's above ground or below ground, but and each one's different. Obviously, a bonsai root can live in the water and grow in the water, but what's one of the ingredients of water? Oxygen. So it's getting it somehow or another, but not to the degree of where you put a spruce in water, it's going to die because it's going to I need air. So and each one of them is different. So. Getting back to the root system here on this one, that what I'm trying to do is get down into the middle of things as far as that goes. That the tree can live with a lot of, if it's a good healthy tree and it's got a lot of roots, it can reestablish itself. Now, one of the things about collecting a tree is that you want to try to get its vigor up, because it might be in a poor location or wherever, and you're all of a sudden trying to get it healthy so you can do something with it and keep it alive. Now, which is what I'm trying to do is keep as many roots in this. But if you go buy a bulb and burlap tree that's growing out in the nursery, for instance, in a field. No, it's not a chalkboard anymore. Unless that's on the other side. Okay. Got a tree. Think about it, you think. Okay. And here's your soil. And that root system is growing like this. So on and so forth. And a lot more finer and stuff like that. And let's say that's a 3-inch caliper tree. And the roots are growing out in a nursery field, and it's pretty much, the roots are up in the top foot of the soil. Or if it's a 2-inch tree, they're going to dig a 24-inch ball. Because a ball should be, if you get a 2-inch caliper here, it should be a 24-inch wide ball. If it's less than that, don't buy it. Here's why. Think about how many roots are going out this way and back that way too. Come in with a tree spade or a hand spade or whatever the case may be, and you get this much of it. Now, depends on the root system of the tree, whether it's fibrous or it's one that's very coarse like a pine.
What about a taproot?
There isn't any. None around here.
No trees have taproots? Some trees
They
have-
do only to a certain point, because like I said, roots need air as much as they need water. They only go down so far, and if they don't have the air and the water, they ain't going any further. In other words, you got a tree like this, and here's the ground. Your root system does not look like this.
No, don't many trees have a strong root?
Only
a
to
tap
start
root
with.
that goes down, huh?
Only to start with. Only in their younger days. They do that as they grow, you know, they can put down a little, to some extent to kind of anchor themselves. They don't want to fall over. You know, they're not thinking that, but that's, you know, that's what they're doing. So you get this, and now I have seen trees that actually, if you've taken a like this and they put a basket on it or whatever the case may be, or just burlap and string or burlap and nails or whatever. If they don't root prune this while it's in the nursery field for the 3, 4, 5, 6 years or whatever, do it once or twice, you can have up to 90% of the roots gone when they don't burlap. And it'll still survive. If it's healthy, and it's going in a place where if you put it in a hole that's like shaped like this, and this is all chopped up soil where they can get air and water, again, and those roots come out of the side of the ball and they can keep on growing out. Okay? Now, that's one of the reasons why you do that, to get them out so they can get their air and water and the nutrients from the soil out beyond and keep on growing. If you make a hole the same size as the bulb burlap thing is, root's going to come out, hit the clay, especially around here, and they're going to start going around in circles. And then what happens to that is that all the roots just stay in that hole. Underground, it can dry out faster than you can imagine. Because it'll put roots out, it'll suck all the water out of it, suck all, you know, and all that's left is air, and it dries up. And it causes root damage. If you have let a root dry too long, it dies, as far as that goes. So, so one of the questions you want to ask when you get a bulb burlap tree is, how many times did that thing get trained? You know, because one of the things that help alleviate losing all these roots is that when this tree was maybe this big, you know, in the field, okay, literally that size. And when we put it in the field, 2 years later, it might be this big. Now, what you want to have them do is, because the roots are out here, growing out, because they will only want to grow radially away from the trunk, for the most part. They actually just want to grow wherever it's easiest to grow. But hence the reason why, like these, if it hit a rough, hit the clay, it's just going to grow around in the good stuff that's backfilled. Because it's loose in area and it's got stuff. But if they take a spade and trim the roots, what it does is it root prunes and causes one root that's going to go like this to be more like this, because it's getting cut off, and then these, you know, anything out that got the circle where its spade is. It's a lousy spade, I know, but still, you get the picture. It can cause, and it's the same thing when you take a tree out of a pot and you trim it a little bit, or first time out of a pot and going into a bonsai thing, is you do a little bit of trimming with the long roots, it'll force back branching of that. So. Now, what I'm going to do, because I know for a fact, see, I can take this much off of this nice healthy tree. I could do a short cut if I want to. That is more than enough to have this survive. Wow. Now, since there's a lot of food in this thing, as far as that goes, what's left, I can trim off some of the top as well, because this will only produce, this will only shove more stuff up into here. And if I trim some of this to where I want it to go, what I want to leave it as, because probably what I'll end up doing is ginning this, because I said it's to grow full of old trees, looking like old trees. I'm going to gin this part, and is I've got kind of a gnarly little trunk, and obviously it's been a tree that's been growing around other trees, and they're not always straight. You know, now if you get the tree out in the open for quite a while, things will start straightening up. I mean, I've seen more crookeder, that's a good word, isn't it? More crooked Dawn redwoods than this, and put it out in the full sun, and in half a dozen years, it's got a straight trunk. You won't even know. So, but we like things that are gnarly. You know, we except for those who like a formal tree, a formal upright, as far as that goes. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've done a few as far as that. But I like the things with character. That's just me. And again, it's my tree. I can do whatever I want with it. I like not making gnarly old trees, but in miniature as far as that goes. And of course, that goes back to, you know, I mean, I just prefer it. I mean, that's just the way, you know, my taste stuff. But, you know, again, it even goes back to what I learned in my beginner's class 1,000 years ago, that, you know, the idea with the Chinese and the Japanese, they like making a miniature of something that's gnarly and aged and old and something to be respected and the whole bit. And then, of course, you know, we in our class that I was in, you know, talked about that and some of the religious and philosophical meanings to that, and having reverence for something with age, you know. And I immediately, you know, when I first started hearing stuff like that, I said, well, you know, you're supposed to respect your elders, and I guess it's, you know, it goes along with trees too. And you think about, you know, one of the things that came to my mind almost immediately the first night was, you know, well, it started in China, and we always kind of hear things about people climbing up the mountains to see the old gray, long-haired, bearded guru to say, what's the meaning of life? Or how do I prune this tree? Or whatever the case may be. But it's always, you know, the older somebody gets, I mean, they have a respect for that. And it's part of their nature and their, you know, their livelihood. That, you know, sometimes that's a little missing here, because I know maybe some of you, you know, are kind of old farts like me, and you know, we've been kind of been, you know, my kids even put me down, well, you're just getting to be an old farter, you're an old this, you know. And I had somebody once, a younger girl, last year or 2 years ago, she was in her 30s, and she couldn't win an argument with me on horticulture. I was trying to explain to her what, you know, I won't get into the details of that, and I said, well, this is the way it is, and this is, you know, this, whatever it was. And she goes, oh, you just sound like a boomer. Okay, I know what that means nowadays. If you don't, look it up. But, you know. So, in fact, she even told her daughter, she says, don't listen to him, he's just a boomer. You know, he's just talking like a boomer. You know, to me, that sounds kind of, you know, that's lending itself to be a little more on the nasty side of things as far as that goes. You know, so, okay, fine, you know. Then she came back and started talking to me about the same problem again with somebody else, and he was a little bit younger than me, and he backed me up, and he just said, you're wrong. Bye. You know, it was done. So, if anybody wants to hear the rest of that story and details, it's like what's his name used to be, Paul Harvey used to say. That's showing my age a little bit, isn't it? So, does anybody have any questions? Because I'm rattling my mind, you know, myself off here.
We talked about repotting the redwoods. Would you consider the same reduction on the maples and repotting at the same time, or would that you treat those differently?
Well, again, it still goes back to knowing what your tree is and how healthy it is, and so on. There's some things you can get about. You know, I know that's going to survive. You know, I could cut off a couple more things on there. So whatever energy is in that root system, what's left of that root system is going to go up that trunk. You know, there's plenty. I mean, that's pretty furry as far as, you know, root system is concerned. So there's going to be a whole lot of opportunity, because I'm going to, you know, clean that off and put it in with the other ones that are in bonsai mix, as far as that goes. And it's gonna be able to take off. It's gonna have room, it's not gonna have any, anything that's hindering the growth of the root system. And it'll be able to intertwine in amongst the other ones in the growth, which is what I wanna do.
If you collect a tree in the wild,
Yeah.
do you keep it in the soil you dig it up with for a period of time, or can you?
Yes, well, it all depends,
clean the-
it really depends on what the tree is. Now when a particular client I was telling you about, it literally, like I said, it's a tree that's about this tall, and the trunk is like here. Here's the top of it, kind of snakes this way a little bit. And literally, the pocket of ground that I got it in, I trimmed a root, it was probably this big, one root, that went beyond the pocket where it was at. You see that tray? That is basically the equivalent of the pocket of soil that tree was living in for 250 years. With the exception of that one root that happened to go this way down into a crack in the mountains in the rock or whatever.
Okay, what about a deciduous tree like the one in front of you? If you were digging that, collecting that
Right.
in the wild, would you keep it in its wall of soil that you dig out?
Well, for the first couple of years you can,
For-
at
you
least.
have to.
You don't have to.
So you can trim the soil.
You can actually, what I would do, now, it depends, again, it depends on what kind of soil it's growing in. Like, when I picked up that tree, I trimmed off that one root and I picked up the whole pad of roots. And it was nothing but decomposed granite and whatever pine needles and spruce needles and leaves that decayed on it in it for its entire life span. And that's what fed it, as far as nutrients were concerned. Okay? Contrary to popular belief, because there used to be I used to know some people that were in the society many years ago, they put rocks around in their bonsai because they know that the soil mix in the bonsai mix was just, like turfus and chicken grit or decomposed granite and pine bark. Okay? And like mine that I have, my bonsai mix is 50% pine bark, 25% turfus, 25% some stone of some sort, decomposed granite or chicken grit, whatever the case may be. So when you get really down to it, there's not much there in the way of nutrients. And trees need, there's a major nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and then there's some those are macronutrients, and then there's micronutrients. And that includes things like sulfur and iron and chlorine and magnesium and manganese and I can't remember them all. I just take them for granted. Somewhat sulfur and iron, zinc, maybe one of them too. So it needs all those. Now some of them don't need as much as others, and some seem to do fine without that. But one of the people was saying, well, I put rocks in the soil when I water the bonsai plant, rocks sitting on the top. I let the water etch off some micronutrients into the soil. Now, I happen to be a rock collector, so I know rocks a little bit. And I know that water's running off of there and it's not picking up anything and putting it in the soil for that tree. Especially if it turns out to be nice, pretty rocks came out there that came out of, like, for instance, Lake Superior and the little granite boulders. They only got quartz and feldspar and mica in them. That's the three ingredients to have granite. If you don't have any one of those three, you don't have granite. You got to have all three. So that's the ingredients to make up granite. So granite. Pardon the pun. But granite that those three minerals that are in there have some other elements because they're not. I think quartz is the only one that's silica, but feldspar's got a number of things that make up that. Mica can be a number of different chemical properties or mineral properties that make up what mica is made out of. you just gotta, there's a way of, finding out. I've got a book that has all the chemical properties of all the different rocks and minerals and crystals and things. So, what the plant needs isn't gonna get it out of the rock. In fact, you may even do more harm than good, like for instance, like if you put limestone rocks in there, you're gonna raise your pH level up because limestone's a great, calcium and dolomite material, and that helps raise the pH of soils that are low. So that's one of the things that kind of bugs me to no end is why they put limes on agricultural fields down the road from me. And I go, why? I said, a foot down, you're running into clay, and the only thing, the difference between, what clay is basically mineral material that's really, really super fine, and it's mostly limestone because the Cincinnati area, we're on the Cincinnati Dome, and it's, it's known for fossils in the Ordovician period, and its limestone is thousands and thousands of feet thick. I got a mine down the street from me. They're down 1,000 feet. When one of the guys told me, he says, yeah, we run into pockets of salt water. And they know geologically speaking, they are down to the point where it's 800, 900 million years ago. Close to 1 billion years. And but the other thing that kind of floored me to no end, he says, our Claremont County is basically around 850 to 880 feet above sea level. So they're down in the mine a mile and a half down the road from me, and they're down below sea level. That just kind of blows your mind a little bit. At least it does me. So, and that's, the geology of it. But getting back to that, the tree in the pocket, it was growing fine for 200 plus years in that pocket of soil and getting whatever it could out of there, as well as whatever the other root was grabbing somewhere down the road. And now I have it in a training pot that's like 3 times that, a little bit deeper. It's a rectangular pot like that. But I've had trouble keeping the plant standing up because it won't root out. It just doesn't want to root out. It's happy. It's just, okay, what I've got in here is just fine. I've lived with it for a number of years. It hasn't rooted out and done, hasn't done anything like this, which I wish it would. But it's going to make for repotting real easy for me because I can put it in a nice oval pot that's probably this deep and try surrounding it with some soil and anchor it down and be done with it. So one of the things that I did as an experiment, I had a Dawn redwood tree growing in a 20-gallon pot. It had a 4 to 5 inch caliper on the bark. Okay, and I took the tree out of this 20-gallon pot, and I found out that it didn't do this at all. As you see, there's a major root there. Well, this one in particular went down into the soil. You can see there's a nice little root flare on that thing, as far as that goes. It went down and then made a right-hand turn, went to the pot, this major root, and then just went around and around and around in the 5 years it was in there. I didn't expect that. And I'm talking this big road going around the pot. I can't sell that. Who the hell's going to prune that like I just did with this? Because one of the things that I do, for instance, is I recommend when somebody takes them out of a nursery pot, I'm going to do it this way, that if you get like this and you're going to plant it in your landscape, for instance, and it's too much to do this, or this is still kind of loose. But you can take. The only root pruning you need to do is because the roots are growing out and they're trying to grow radially away from the trunk and get spread out so they hold itself up from the whole bit, even though they're not thinking that. Now remember, they don't think, they don't know anything. But as you go around, I was thinking like 12, 3, 6, and 9, like a clock, and cut. everything. Now, and you can do it 5, 6 times around if you want to. I did 2 for just the sake of doing that. And it'll do just fine. Because like I said, I know this is going to survive, and that's a lot less pruning of the roots than this. So, but in fact, that's sometimes I take a tree out of a pot and I'm going to put it into a training pot like I might do with this one. As far as that goes, I might, I might even, like that one I was doing with the nut, give this little tool there that basically was really, that was an extreme version of that. But doing that gets rid of all the roots that are trying to grow in a circle, and then they'll start going out from there. So, and that's
what did you do with that big old root that was around?
Oh, on that other tree?
Yeah.
Well, okay, many years ago, I got this idea that, now mind you, this was like a 14-foot Don redwood. Okay, so I thought, I got nothing to lose. I'm going to play around with this thing and just see what the heck happens. So what I did is I found the trunk and I went like this, and I literally cut this much of the root, because it was basically like the elbow. I mean, it was just, it's easier to go through. Okay, forget that. It goes up there. So, what I basically had was like one major root. It had a little nice taper, but it had one major root that did this. And it hit the pot and just kept going around and around and around. Just going that way, coming back this way, going around.
So if you get that in a bonsai tree, a shorter tree, and you have a root going around and around and around the pot, you cut it off, right?
You can.
Okay.
If it's that big, you probably on the
But if it's that big, you wouldn't, but if it's.
Right.
But
Well,
I'm talking small bonsai trees.
So here's what I did. Here's what I did. I cut it like there, okay? I put it in a pot not much bigger than, well, maybe it was a 5-gallon pot. And here's where the original soil level was. Here's down here. Of course, mind you, I said, these big roots went around, and they came around again, and so on and so forth. And there was not much in the way of hairs up here at all. I just cut this thing off. Look at that big around. That's it. I took this and put this in a pot. And then I left this grow up. I mean, I left it. What I also did was too, is I did leave one little branch, just something to give it a draw. And I had this, and I was going to gin this part. Then I got the idea from somebody that I knew, or knew many years ago, because he was one of the masters. He took an arborvitae that he collected. Okay? Much better root system than this. He collected it. And what he did was, in generally speaking, he cut it off like this. No branches, no nothing. He had all the root system in the world, or whatever he could get, as far as that goes. And you gotta remember, arborvitae are kind of like junipers around here when you go up north. It's almost like a weed. You go to Michigan, you see them all over the place. And you can tell where the deer have been, or where the deer are heavier, because there's a browse line 5 feet down. So, well, what he did was, is he took this tree, in order to get taper to it, he cut 4 of these down to here. In other words, you look at it from the top, he cut, let's see, how would that look like? Basically this and this from the top, but then he cut it in this V. So that all was left was basically those, like 4 fingers, okay? And he cut this, he pruned it down. I can't remember for sure how he did. He pruned it down pretty far, And then he took wood screws and tied them together. So what he ended up with is a tree that looked like that. And the screws went around and held these 4 points together. And then as the tree grew, it put out branches. They do break back, by the way, as far as that goes. And he might have left some on the tree as well. But he created this tree that literally probably was maybe 20 or 30 foot tall, I guess. And to pot and all, I mean, if this is the pot, the tree was only this big. And it had taper from the top to the bottom. And I'm talking taper like this big, you know, to 0.
Do you think that technique would work on something like a crabapple? Like a landscape crabapple?
It's possible. Now, mind you, the Don redwood's kind of, you know, most conifers would have somewhat of a soft wood to them, a little bit more flexibility. You know, when you talk about a crabapple, oh, the other thing is I didn't do this in the middle of winter either. for my Don redwood, I just play around with it. Said, heck, well, I'm just try cutting it together. You know, I was using whatever saws and things that I had, and after I got it together and I banded it, I didn't use wood screws, but I banded it together like some garden hose, the rubber strapping and wire on the outside of that, and band them together. See if they grow together, great. If not, I got some great material to use with my die grinder and gin the daylights out. You know, as far as that goes. But it's there. But then one of the sides put out buds. One of those 4 points put out buds and grew. Now, you know, now my tree was like this when I started. Now it's like this tall. And I cut it off and get it to break back some more, or gin that part and let some other branching happen to it as far as that goes. So just playing around and experimenting, needless to say. So, but I remembered him, you know, doing that to create that, you know, that tree with a, you know, fast taper, you know, taper and short distance, which is obviously one of the things that you want to try to do with your small tree is have, you know, that natural taper there. You know, there are some, you know, like I was showing you, that, you know, some would take one off and have a stump. I like being able to use the stump. You know, sometimes you see a lot of trees that do that, and they have branches, and then you see that stump in there. I'd rather leave some of it there and do something artistic with it, as far as creating a beginning of a shari or something down the tree, so on and so forth. It just kind of bugs me. That's me. You know, some people just, you know, they're fine with that. You know, it's just like, you know, they wouldn't bother doing anything with this. But, you know, the whole thing here with this one being the Chinese elm is try to get this branch to grow and bush out. But, you know, this can be a nice little rounded tree as far as that goes, and you get a lot of branching going in here. And, you know, it's not, at this stage of the game, it's not going to look like a 200-year-old tree. It's going to look like maybe a 75 to 100-year-old deciduous tree. But, which is nothing wrong with that, you know. The guy that told me about, well, it's your tree, you can damn well do whatever you want with it. He creates trees that look like they're 3,000 or 4,000 years old. And some of them are, because he's done a little microscopic work on these gnarly things he collects in the Rocky Mountains and up to Alaska and down south to who knows where. That, you know, he can figure out, he finds the really gnarly ones that have been beat to hell and back and still survived. And then what he does is he creates gin where there isn't, because it would look good if it was there. So he puts the branching to coordinate with the gin. You know, if it's got a nice gnarly gin, he takes the branches and makes them nice gnarly branching. It's like, you know, the same kind of characteristic. You know, it's just like, you know, well, you know, this is going to have some gracefulness to it, so on and so forth. But, you know, he'd be apt to say, well, you know, bring this down here and bring it around there and put some roughing on here and wire that and really give it some more character. it's an option. You know, you've got options as far as that goes. Well, now that it's really 7:45. Thank you, Joey. I don't know, does anybody have any questions? Nothing?
Or you said that was an arborvitae that you did that too, right?
Yeah,
Don't you wanna leave the foliage on them?
well, that is an evergreen.
So he topped that.
Well, he did, yeah, he took off, probably 90% of the trees.
So, and then where's some lower branches?
There were some lower branches that kept it alive, yes. Yeah. Not very many, but there was some there. Now, one time after that, that I remember him being here, I was in Canada and I did not go prepared on a flying fishing trip. I didn't take a pair of prunes. I could have brought one naturally home like that. I boated over to some place and I looked at it, I saw this tree and it wiggled. And I said, if I could just get down in there and cut the roots off of it in the swamp, because they do grow in the water like Bonsai up there. And it was a tree that the water level was this big and it was only, the whole tree was only this high. That was it. The main reason being is that that thing got beat the daylights out of its entire life with all the other trees around in that area, because lakes rise and they fall because they're kind of controlled by dams in different areas of the lake system up there to get water to flow back towards Lake Superior, for instance. And they have hydroelectric dams of various places. Two of them is rivers where there's bigger ports, and it produces electricity. So lakes are put up in the wintertime, and of course when water rises and it freezes and it thaws and everything else, and the ice breaks down branches and whatnot, these trees don't have a chance. Sometimes they get completely covered in the wintertime up there. They get a lot of snow, they get a lot of rain as far as that goes. So, you get all of that nature affecting the tree, you're gonna get dwarfness. Just like the pine that I collected. I collected that off about that far above the water line on one of the lakes on a grand cliff. And it was a 180-year-old tree, give or take a week. And it was only this much of the original tree, and it just had one branch that was still alive, going down almost to the water line. And it was gnarly because I could tell. You think about something that a lake, those lakes, go to the point where they will freeze 10, 15, 20 feet deep in the wintertime. And then when it breaks up in the spring and thaw, that ice doesn't go away like that. It goes away in chunks depending on what location of the lake it's at. Like for instance, the sunny part of the lake, and this is all next to woods and it's shady, it's going to stay ice there. Eventually it breaks apart and it floats out this way, and a storm comes through in the spring and blows the ice against this way. Think about it. Let your imagination go wild, and it probably is falling true for those trees as far as that goes. So different things can happen and cause those great gnarly trees to form as far as that goes. So again, I'm talking about I like this grove. I'm working on one of these darn redwoods because it isn't taking very long to do, and my main tree, there was always a main tree in a grove planting where, you've got the grandfather, or whatever, dad, if you will, and you got all the, you got the dad, and the wife is a little shorter, and all the kids and grandkids and great grandkids and so on and so forth living underneath them. So, that. But they're all, it's nice and straight in a forest, as far as that goes. It's not like a lake setting or something that's on a cliffside, for instance, on the side of Washington State, mountains in British Columbia, for instance. So, but again, to kind of, reiterate, you gotta know your trees, you gotta know what you can get away with, and sometimes it's just a little bit of experimentation like that, what I did with the Dawn Redwood, and it's still alive, I mean, by rights, it should be dead, because 99% of the roots were gone off of it. But the thing is, even though you can see this much root here, the roots, believe it or not, hold a lot of nutrients for this year's growth. And they store a lot of food in those root systems. In fact, even though that root was this big around and only this big of a chunk, I knew there was a lot of food storage in it. And enough to produce roots, and enough to produce roots, it's going to start popping buds and start growing. And that's what, it comes to really knowing what you can do, what you can get away with. You can experiment. Mind you, if you did that with a different conifer, like for instance a Scots pine, it wouldn't survive. There wouldn't be enough roots there. Nothing to be able to take it out, as far as that goes. But these things are so resilient. It's kind of like what I've had some people on the club even tell me that you can't kill a ficus. Well, I have, but and so Kevin said too. And but when I look back at it, I know that, I know what I did wrong. Let's put it that way. So I wasn't given enough light or enough water at times. I let it dry out too much, or overwatered it. I've been guilty of all the above as far as that goes. But it's still fun to grow them. It's still fun to grow anything, and playing around with something, and you don't know it unless you work with it. This one in particular too. I bought this only because I was just grabbing a bunch, and it's got a nice curve to it. It's a young Dawn Redwood seedling. This thing's only a couple of years old, 2 or 3 years old, or whatever. And I said, well, I want to keep this part, and I can play around with these branches. Now, one of the things that I even told Steve, he'll tell you, I said he's got one, and I think you've got yours over root over rock. And if he wants to, if he hasn't done it already, you could still, he was asking what he could do with it. I said, you can literally take all the branches off of this now because it's dormant. Every branch on it, except leaving the trunk. Now this is planned, mind you, this is planned to be ginned, but even so, if you want to come up here and look at this when I get done here in a minute, you'll see green buds growing on here anyway. It's going to bunch out, leaf out. But I was planning, the only thing I was going to do is just gin this and carve and not get it straight. I'm going to carve it so it looks like this. And then actually, if you take the cambium off and it's nice and soft and wet, you can wire gin and put curvature to it. But if it gets hard and dried out, and literally dead, it gets pretty crispy and you can't bend it.
So you keep talking about gin and these Dawn Redwoods. Do they hold the gin pretty well?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I had no idea.
But like I said, I could take this one after I get the cambium off, and it's still nice and green and succulent. I can wrap that with maybe some 3mm or 4, get it started here and wrap it around that, and I can give it a little bit of twist to it. Because they would look stupid to have a straight gin on here, with a nice, point or whatever. Because the whole tree's growing crooked as far as that goes. And I want to keep on doing that as far as that is. And then the branches, if I did keep any of these, because it's gnarly like this, branches on a gnarly tree are going to be curvy and naturally too, as being old. So I could keep a couple of these and make them kind of gnarly, give some place for the new leaves to come out. I'm still deciding what to do with it, other than the fact that it's going to be a curly, gnarly tree, and these don't fit. These straight things don't fit. Now I could take them all off and let all these things, you look up and down this trunk and all these branches and whatnot. If you looked hard enough, you'll find buds that are coming out. And, you know, I mean, they're in here too. And if I took everything off, and then when spring comes, finally, warms this up and all that energy's coming up, it's gonna go up those trunks. And where are the branches? Where am I supposed to go? Well, guess what? It will produce growth on what they call adventitious buds that may be lying underneath the bark or inside the cambium someplace. And trees produce that, produce those. If they got no place else to go, it will kickstart some buds to grow. And that's what we look for in trees that, you know, everybody wants to ask the same question: does that break back? Does that break back? But you can force it to. Just like I said, you can take this stone redwood and cut it off there. That energy is going to come up and go someplace. It's going to come popping out somewhere. And that any tree will do that for the most part. I mean, some have a better propensity to do it than others. Like obviously you go out to an oak tree, it's, you know, you cut it off at 4 feet and it's got a caliper this big around it. You might not be lucky enough to get any buds to break on that. Okay? I mean, you would be real lucky to do that, because even though that they're in there or under there or whatever, kind of sitting there waiting to go because it's in their genes to do that, they only have that ability for so long. And then they get too old. They get older and more mature, and they don't do that.